Hello and welcome to Thursday Night Live. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Great and interesting topic. I've been kind of on this little rampage lately, and this is one of the fallouts of it. And so today, I'm going to be talking about natural remedies versus synthetic remedies. And so natural remedies. So when we think of natural remedies, they're rooted in plant-based therapies, like herbs, those things. All right, I'm touching something on my screen. Hang on one second. There we go. They're rooted, but they're rooted in plant-based therapies like herbs. And they were the cornerstone of healthcare prior to the adoption of allopathic medicine and drug-based therapies. And so from the historic record, the earliest known medical text that we have of herbs and herbal preparations dates from around 2100 BC and a Sumerian tablet that was found in Nippur. And it reflects a foundational knowledge in herbal medicine. And it discusses plants that were used in order to, like herbal remedies, like it has a recipe, okay? It has a recipe of what you can use in order to facilitate certain kind of health cure outcomes. So one preparation, for example, asks the physician to crush and grind tamarisk, myrtle, thyme, and mix them with beer, and then have the patient drink that. And so while the tablet doesn't tell you what the specific health issue was, based on the products that were in this combination, it was probably used for somebody with stomach problems or cough or chest infection, or maybe just as an overall health tonic. But traditional therapies predate by the rise of allopathic medication by millennia. And in fact, some subjective evidence of herbal remedies being used actually dates back to Neanderthals. And so there were some Neanderthal skulls that were discovered. And scientists were investigating the dental plaque in their mouth, so the tartar. And in the tartar, they found pollen and fibers from certain plants. But one of the skulls they found, the guy had white willow bark, like fibers and pollen from white willow bark, as well as a couple of other herbs in his teeth. And it was distinct from anything else that anyone had in their tartar. But when they looked at the rest of what was going on with this young man, they discovered that he had a really big tooth abscess, which would have caused a lot of pain. And white willow bark, for example, was the precursor to aspirin. And so he would have received some kind of pain relief by chewing on that bark. But herbs come in a variety of forms, including fresh, dried, and bottled in liquid. In later time, or the earliest ones, in later times, they were made into tablets and capsules that we know today. But preparations that are made from herbs are usually administered as teas, tinctures, poultices. A poultice is something that you would put on a wound to soothe it, or raw plant materials like you would get in a capsule of some kind of an herb. These plants were usually, back in the day, they were locally sourced and self-administered, and which made them available to everyone. And there are three traditional methods in which you can draw out the active components out of herbs. You know, one is you can take the dried leaves and steep them in hot water and create a tea. If the plant material is hard, so like a root or a bark, so like dandelion root or licorice root, you know, those things would be boiled in water, and that would help extract the active ingredients. And they can also be made into a tincture where the leaves and stems and bark pieces are put into some kind of an alcohol, and they're allowed to sit for a period of time, pulling out the good stuff into the alcohol, and then that's strained and then used. Simple, straightforward, and used for centuries around the world. Now, synthetic drugs are completely different, and allopathic doctors, with the rise of that practice, decided to take that route in the creation of medicinal substances for people. And so early medical drugs started out as some kind of plant material, but they took them and put them into a solvent to extract the chemicals out of it. And so usually in the very beginning, that was water or alcohol, but then they would add a reagent into that solution, and then the extracting and then, all right. Yeah. So, and then they would add a reagent to that, and which would allow the active compound to precipitate into a solid, and then they were air dried and formed into a crystal or powder. You know, so that's why many medications you take today don't look anything like anything except a crystal or powder, because that was how they wanted to present them. But drug companies, you know, back in the day and today, use a variety of chemicals. And so these are some of the very earliest ones that were being used. And they included ethanol, ether, sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, acetic acid, ammonia, lime, sodium bicarbonate, sodium hydroxide, acetic androgen something, calcium hypochlorite, charcoal, and sodium bicarbonate. Doesn't sound very good to me. So for example, so this was a very early drug that was made. And so what they would do is they would take a poppy plant and they would harvest the resin from the plant, and that was dissolved in hot water. Then they would add a dilute sulfuric acid to it, and that would form morphine sulfate. Then ammonia or lime was added to that to neutralize the acid, and it was dried and ground into a white powder. The result? Morphine, which is an opioid derivative. Okay. Okay, Rita. Hey. But as time passed, they started to steer away from just using natural products in their manufacturing process, and they began to create non-natural or compounds that started out as non-natural parts. Did that make sense? So, for example, chloroform, like, you know, you watch those movies and they have chloroform on the rag and they knock the person out. Chloroform is actually made by taking alcohol or acetone and mixing it with calcium hypochlorite. These names kill me. You know, so they started with a non-natural item. They mixed it with more non-natural items to create yet another non-natural item. And so I'm not even going to try. I have a whole paragraph here. I'm going to read like maybe the first sentence because it's unintelligible, but I translated it sort of. And so this is the chemical solution, or part of the chemical solution for making a statin drug, Lipitor. Okay, and this is just one section of it. And so it says, to a solution of 2- parenthesis, 4R, comma, 6R, parentheses, dash 6, parentheses 2 dash parentheses 2 dash parentheses 4 dash fluorophenol, parentheses, close parentheses, dash 5 dash isopropyl dash 3 dash phenol dash 4 dash parentheses phenocarbinol. And it goes on like that for an entire paragraph. And like I said, this is just one segment of the chemical formulation of a statin drug like Lipitor. But here's the translated version. So, so to make this drug, chemists started out with a base compound. And so I was reading you part of the chemical makeup of that base compound, which is already unintelligible. Okay, so they take that base compound that was formulated earlier in the process. They take 200 grams of this compound and dissolve it into a mix of two liquids, tetrahydrofluoron and water. Then they slowly add a solution of potassium hydroxide. Next, they add heptane, a type of solvent, and mix everything together for 30 minutes, probably in their crock pot. Then they keep the water-based layer, which contains the product they want, and mix it with another solvent, ethyl acetate, to pull out the desired chemicals. Finally, they wash the solution with brine to clean it up. Then again, this resulting compound goes through yet another process. But as you can see, my head is already spinning just by trying to read through and understand this. It makes me go, do I really want to take prescription medications? But let's just keep it real, because there's a time and a place for everything. So herbs can be locally grown, they can be wild harvested, or you can buy them online. They're affordable and everyone has access to them, easy access to them. They're less toxic, they have fewer chemical artifacts, meaning you don't have any of this chemical compound that might not get fully cleaned out of the solution. They offer a gentler solution to a health challenge. Conversely, their lower concentration of active components make them safer from potential adverse reactions. The drawback to herbal remedies is that the quality of the plant and the preparation of the remedy can make these things less predictable. Prescription medications, on the other hand, allows for the isolation of the active compound. They offer a faster relief to a situation. Their synthesis is standard, which ensures that one batch is the same as the next. Okay. And if there is a demand, they can sit there and mass produce these products and have them be consistent batch to batch. Bottom line, herbs lower strain work slower, but in a gentler manner, making them a perfect choice for mild or chronic conditions. Their lack of chemical processing makes them less toxic in general. Drugs are superior for acute and life-threatening conditions. They work rapidly and are great for emergency situations. Now, while they offer a quick fix to a problem, their formulation methods leave them more toxic and leaves the patient with a higher risk of side effects. So let's put this into perspective, when talking about working with herbs. Hi, everybody. That's Slow-Mo. That's who is making all the noise. Let's put this into a perspective. Over the past 25 years, it's estimated that 150 to 1,000 people died in the U.S. from the effect of herbal medicine. In the same period, it's believed that between 2.5 and 5 million people die from adverse reactions to drugs. So that's basically 100,000 to 200,000 prescription drugs reported annually. So it's your choice and your health. But I hope this information provides you with some thinking room of which way you want to go with your health and your health concerns. that's my thing for today. And I hope that gives you something to think about. You know, it was not, I always knew that, you know, taking prescription medications just weren't good for you and they were really toxic. I was a bit surprised with, you know, the little bit that I uncovered. And I think just that little bit I uncovered was enough to make it so that I mean, I've already made a choice, but I'm more committed to the choice that I've made. Okay. So with that said, you know, if there's things going on and you want to work with someone that, you know, is well versed in herbal remedies and natural healing, reach out to me at soulhealer.com and set up a time for a private consultation. You know, maybe you don't want to take that medication, and are looking for some alternative solutions. Thursday Night Live is also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And stop by there and download my free 50-page guide, which is Jumpstart Your Intuition and get started on your path to opening up your psychic abilities every day. And, you know, before you cut out for the evening, you know, you might want to connect with me on social media. YouTube, Substack, Twitter, and Rumble are the main places I hang out. And so it's all good. Okay.